TBCN presents Creating Your Own Job, a new series aimed at providing you with resources and assistance to start your own business. Financial assistance, analyzing the marketplace, marketing strategies, implementing the plan, creating your own job.
Welcome to Creating Your Own Job, a series devoted to giving you information you need to start your own business, especially in this particular time that we're in with perhaps unemployment being rampant. Here's an opportunity for you to go into business for yourself, and we brought in experts to help us understand all the elements to starting a business. And fortunately, we have with us today, Rochelle Friedman-Walk. Welcome.
Thank you.
She is a volunteer with SCORE and is going to tell us about SCORE. And she's also an attorney, so she's going to tell us about that aspect of things. And Doug Pace, who's a technology consultant.
That's right.
And member of the Board of Governors or Executive Committee of the Greater Tampa Chamber of Commerce. Welcome. Glad you could be here.
Thank you.
James Sutton, who knows about taxes and more than just taxes. You're a lawyer and a CPA.
Yes.
And so welcome to you. I'm glad you could all be here. I'm going to start off with Rochelle. If you would talk about SCORE for people who may not know what it is and what it does.
I'm delighted to. SCORE is actually an organization of primarily retired or semi-retired executives. It was created by an act of Congress in 1964.
Who knew?
Who knew, exactly. And there's over 400 chapters in the United States. The Hillsborough County chapter is chapter number 203. We've been in business a long time. And we are fortunate. We have a website at www.hillsborough.score.org if somebody would like to go out and learn about SCORE. Primarily what SCORE does is we offer educational seminars. We offer free counseling, almost like having your own private board of advisors. If you're in a smaller business, you might be able to get an advisor who can help you think through all of the business issues that you face as you try to start your business, expand your business, develop your business. And then, as I said, we also offer seminars, getting into business seminars, marketing and sales seminars. They're $35 each. They're usually taught on a Saturday morning. And then we offer just a tremendous amount of resources, both here locally in Tampa, as well as across the United States and internationally as needed.
And for people who don't know what SCORE stands for?
It's actually not used anymore, but it used to be called the Senior Corps of Retired Executives.
It's not used anymore?
It's used as SCORE. No, they don't actually use the name Senior Corps of Retired Executives anymore. And I never really asked why. I got involved with them in 1986 when I first started my career in Cleveland, Ohio, and I did a lot of speaking on behalf of SCORE at that time, educational seminars, and we clearly used that name at the time. I think it's because a lot of our participants, a lot of our volunteers are people like myself that are still in the active workforce and also helping volunteer and counsel people at the same time. So I think that the Senior Corps of Retired Executives might be a little bit of a misnomer. We certainly have our share of retired executives, but we have many active working folks too.
Just so they don't think it's baseball.
So.
I mean, it's
Definitely not
SCORE,
baseball.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I also thought it was Service Corps. Is it Senior Corps or what it used to be?
I
Don't know.
I don't
One
know.
of those, but
I'm
it doesn't
sorry.
matter. But they're not retired anymore.
Not everybody is retired.
Right,
There are
right.
certainly their fair share of retired executives, but not everyone's retired. And the greatest thing about SCORE, quite frankly, is it is a resource that people can access. It is just a wealth of knowledge. People who have run businesses, who have started businesses, who have gone into all kinds of business opportures and can
So much of
counsel you
what our
through
government
that.
gives us we don't know about.
It's true.
You know, so it's very good that you're on here. Doug, you're with Bayshore Solutions.
Yes, ma'am.
Want to tell us about your company and what goes
Sure.
on there?
Bayshore Solutions is an internet marketing company. We work with companies as large as Carnival Cruise Lines, Outback Steakhouse, Melting Pot Restaurants, and as small as a two-man law firm. We have an office here and an office in Fort Lauderdale.
And how about the Greater Tampa Chamber?
I'm currently membership chair of the Greater Tampa Chamber.
For people who don't know about this really big chamber that's been here for, what, 100 years or something?
Exactly. Really, the mission of the chamber is to enhance our community by building business success. Three of the driving factors that we have are opportunity, access, and advocacy. Opportunity, creating relationships among business owners and different Fortune 500 or small business owners to create more of a collaborative environment. Two, access, create access to different ways to get involved in the community and different ways to enhance the community. And three, advocacy, working with our government, working with our business leaders, and basically creating a better community.
Making sure we never get a service tax again or anything like that. I certainly
Being in a service industry, I agree with you.
I owned an ad agency when they tried that the last time, and that was incredibly bad because actually the tax was based on how many people watched that show on television that you advertised to. It was just horrendously done, and I'm so glad they got rid of it. And speaking of taxes, so here you are, James. Want to tell us about what you do?
I'm here on behalf of the Lawyer Referral Service for the Hillsborough County Bar Association, and kind of like SCORE, it's a resource to be able to, when you don't know who to find, when you need a lawyer, but just a small business, an individual, they may not come in contact with lawyers very much. And they are a very inexpensive, I believe the fee is $50 to come in, and they refer you to a lawyer that is part of the program, and the lawyers that are part of the program in the county of Hillsborough offer a reduced rate for the referral that comes through. So you get the attorney, a good attorney that specializes in your area. They're pre-screened, and they offer 20 to 50% discount over the normal rate to help you with your issue, whether it's a simple lawsuit or you're starting a business. You want to know what licenses you need. You want to know, find an attorney to help you form the entity. It's a great resource to go to find attorneys that specialize in those areas.
I'm going to go with that, what you just mentioned, and that is setting up the legal structure of the organization. I know there's just different ways, and people probably don't understand sole proprietorships versus partnerships versus Chapter S, blah, blah. Would you talk about when do you want to look at which kind of of structure you should do legally?
Very early in the process, you should start to consider it. A lot of people, when they get their business idea and they're wanting to move forward, it crosses their mind to form some type of entity to do this or not. And if they've never done it before, they're overwhelmed with the idea that all having to file this, they don't know where to go, what to do. Basically, there are only a few choices to be able to do. Either you run the business under your name, a sole proprietorship that has no legal entity whatsoever. And in that scenario, if your business gets any type of liability on it, you take on that liability personally. And that's a lot of risk for somebody to take going into business, taking on debt, or even driving the car down the road in your business, or you hire somebody to drive down the road for your business. They get in a wreck, you could take that liability on personally. For that reason, we would, and I'm sure Felicia would agree, recommend some minimum form of legal entity is probably a good idea. Even if it's as simple as a single member LLC to form, it's very easy to do.
What is an LLC?
A limited liability company.
Okay.
It's an entity separate, legal entity separate from its owner that somebody can form under Florida law, and it separates the liabilities of the business from the individual. So if the business gets sued, as long as they're following the formalities of the entity, they do not take on personal liability for what happens in the business. And I highly recommend at least forming an LLC for a type of business when you're starting your own type of company to protect yourself, protect your family's assets. You could also go through, if you've got more than one owner, to form a partnership, or you can form a corporation, which is a lot more technical, a lot more things that you need to do. You mentioned an S corporation.
Right.
That's more of a tax election outside what type of legal entity you want to do, and it's commonly misunderstood. You can be an LLC or a corporation for legal purposes under state law, and for tax you can choose to be disregarded completely. You're not an entity at all. All the income and expenses flows through to your personal tax return. Or you can choose to be a flow-through type of entity, so the state and the federal government will at least recognize it for tax purposes as a separate entity. You file a separate tax return, but possibly all the income flows through to you, but it files a separate tax return, and it's not a separate tax-paying entity. I wouldn't recommend going with a C corporation election for tax purposes, because it is a much higher level of tax at the corporate level and then again at the owner's level. But it's a lot of choices to make when it comes in just simply getting to the point of what type of entity to form.
Yeah, Rochelle, do you see certain types of industries would be better off to form one type over another?
Yeah, actually, there are some differences, and I absolutely agree with James on the description of the entities. I think it's important to recognize that there are certain types of businesses that are required to have a professional corporation. So, for instance, sometimes you'll see the designation PA or PL. That really means a professional organization. And I get this question a lot at SCORE. Also
That's
in
an
my
attorney
own,
usually, or an accountant?
or an
no?
engineer.
Oh, an engineer too?
Or anybody who holds a professional license.
Okay.
And it really designates that if you are a professionally licensed, and that doesn't mean you're a contractor with a contractor's license. We'll talk about that later. But if you are professionally licensed, you're required to have either a PA, which would be a corporation, a professional association, or a PL, which would be a limited liability organization. But you do have to have that designation. I think the other thing you have to look at is what you intend to do in the long run with your organization. What I have found is that most people, and I think we even have some statistics at SCORE that would suggest most people today are forming LLCs. And they're going out onto sunbiz.org, which is a great way to form your LLC. You're going to get your standard electronic formed LLC without any customization, so something to think about as you're filling that out and you're thinking about what kind of company you want. But you can go online and create your LLC.
You don't need an attorney?
You don't need an attorney to do that. The catch is you've just gotten a very standard document, and it may not be what you need. With that in mind, Louise, what I often think about is what kind of business are you going into? For instance, do you intend to raise money from outside investors at a later date? Because if you do, it may be in your interest to be a corporation. Whereas if it's just a little mom and pop, maybe you're in it, you're by yourself. I have a client in my own law practice who was starting a handyman service. He and his wife were going to do the business together. An LLC is really very appropriate as a starting point because I think, as James pointed out, there's much less paperwork. It's a little simpler organization. I do recommend that all of my clients have an operating agreement. And the reason I recommend that is somewhat like a prenuptial agreement. It's always good to have your agreement up front between you and your partners, whether it's an LLC, a partnership, or even a corporation where you have a shareholders agreement. But it's always better to have that up front and know how are you going to share profits and losses. How are you going to deal with the need for additional liquidity or
Who's going to be
additional
responsible
equity?
for filing the tax return?
Who will, exactly.
I
That kind of
absolutely
thing.
agree, because
Oh, yeah.
when people are forming a business, they tend to put on these rosy colored glasses and think everything's going to be great, and they don't want to think about the bad things that are going to happen. When you're forming the business,
Right.
especially if you've got more than one owner, you really need to think about what are the pitfalls? What's going to happen when this goes wrong and this goes wrong? Who's going to be responsible for ponying up the money to cover this debt? If one person wants to leave, can they sell their shares to somebody else?
Well, and
Think
one
about
thing-
all these
This,
things.
this whole idea of it's like a prenup is
absolutely
really
is.
works out
A partnership is a
it
marriage.
really
I
is.
remember going one time years ago to an attorney to form a partnership with a few other people, And the attorney said, I break up more marriages, more partnerships than I put together. So I want you to think about this very, very carefully. Partnerships are more, there's more inclination for them to go into lawsuits. Is that, would that be right?
I think that
So you
that's
really
true,
should be careful.
especially if you haven't defined how the partnership and how the relationship's going to work. I'll tell you, one of the most interesting problems that I've been seeing lately is that we see a lot of divorce in our community. And unfortunately, sometimes there's death or disability of a partner. And if you haven't planned for some of those types of circumstances in your prenuptial or operating agreement, sometimes you find that your partner's now with the spouse of your partner, not what you intended. And you really have to think through that. And I know I work with clients to say, you know, I know this is a hard topic. Some of you aren't even married yet. Some of you are married and already divorced. But you have to think through what would happen if your marriage fell apart but your business was strong. How would the business run, and what agreements would you have?
Well, that's where items like key man insurance come into play as well.
Exactly.
Are the insurance factors?
Well, like for instance, our operating agreement has stipulations and clauses, but we have key man insurance that pays if one of the managing partners dies.
Exactly.
Where then it actually could offset the cost that you have to pay to the spouse of the other managing partner.
Do I recall from places like Fortune 500 companies I worked for that they didn't really like heads of departments flying together at the same time in case of something? Talk about key man, right? There wouldn't be anybody to take over if you know, the head people were.
Well, you're exactly right, and I've worked for very large corporations, and certainly we have had those kinds of situations where unfortunately something happens, and we had policies about not flying together. But now take that to your small business. If you're partners with somebody and you now have, maybe it's just two of you in business, but it doesn't mean just because there's only two of you together that it isn't a valuable business and that it doesn't offer your family and your
put food on the table for a bunch of people.
Offer you the future that you're looking for. So you do have to think about these things, even if you say, oh, I'm just getting into business, why do I need to worry about it? Well, maybe on day one you don't need to worry about it, but you do have to have a plan in place for what you're going to do when you become that million or multi-million-dollar business and you lose a key person. I think Doug
I think that's
right.
great, and the great advice is what is your 5-year plan of when you become $1 million, $5 million, $10 million, and what do you need to have? And you couldn't have said it better.
James, you were talking a minute ago about liability within a corporation, but I've heard so much about piercing the corporate veil. That can still happen to people, can't it? Even
Absolutely.
if I do an LLC and I start my company,
Believe it or
but
not.
I'm making just, all I'm doing is selling ice cream, but somebody got real sick from it, or I didn't do something right.
Piercing the corporate veil is a very big issue, and I'll tell you one of the reasons why it's gotten even bigger in Florida in the last few years. But initially, there are certain formalities you need to follow. As we said, the LLC has the least amount of formalities, and if you get an attorney to help you in the beginning, you actually elect out of a few more formalities. But the formalities that you say you're going to do, and they're required by law, you need to do. If you treat that entity as it's your alter ego, you keep your personal funds in there, you write your checks for your groceries out of the business account, you use it like it's your personal asset at all times and don't respect it as a separate legal entity, then attorneys that practice other parts of law than I do will come in and represent that person that got sick from the ice cream and pull your corporate records and see that you weren't really treating it as a separate company. And they will appeal to the court to have the company just ignored. Let's go after them personally and get their personal assets. And that's why you want to take it seriously at least once a year. Sit down with your attorney or even your CPA with some good business experience and talk about what you've done for the year. Make sure you're recording what you need to do at the year end at least once a year to make sure you're following those formalities. And get somebody that is not going to be a yes man or a yes woman. Get somebody that's going to chastise you when you're doing it wrong. That's kind of important when you're starting out your own business, is to have that valuable resource.
You're reminding me that I once sold a house to someone who ran a business, but he ran it right inside of his personal checking accounts and so forth. So when he went for the mortgage, he couldn't really show his business making X amount of dollars because he blended, or what's the word? He mixed them in together.
He mixed all his assets, so he couldn't
mixed his
show.
assets, which gave him a real hard time and caused him to have to go to a mortgage broker, pay a little bit more, and that kind of thing. So there's even that advantage to it. Let's talk about technology for a minute, and then we'll go back to some of these other issues because
I'll take
I
right
want
now.
to.
You can have this one.
Yeah. I mean, today it's just so overwhelming to me. There's so much to learn and do and be out there, and all businesses, it appears to me, are going to have to get involved in the internet, and that's something that your company helps with, I guess.
Definitely. Anymore the internet's kind of the window to any business. First thing you do when you meet somebody is you go back and you go, okay, who are they? And you Google them. And then you look for their website, and you look for their portfolio, you look for their LinkedIn account.
How old they are, how much they're making, where they
You
live.
got it. And there's so much information out there anymore.
Florida, I can find anything, yeah.
So, you have to make sure when you have a new business that you've put the time and effort into making sure that you've put just as much energy in creating your web presence as you have in creating your own presence, because it's a reflection, and that's what people use as a litmus test anymore. I have so many clients that come to us and they say, well, I don't need anything operational necessarily, but I have RFPs that I respond to. And the first thing that the people do when I respond to an RFP is go out to my website to check me against my competitors. And I have to look better than every one of my competitors. Then with e-commerce clients, we have a lot of e-commerce clients that you would never know that little small mom and pops are doing $100 million online through different channels like Amazon.com, and through their own websites, and through eBay, and through Google products.
We're going to attack you after this show is over, because we want you to look at our Facebook and our website, tell us what's wrong with it, right?
I'm amazed by some of the things that happen, and I've been in the business for 15 years.
How do you make any sense of it, though? This whole thing with, okay, I'm going to post on Facebook, it's going to Twitter, no, it's going to go to Pinterest, it's going here, there. It's just a massive amount of trying to understand and get a grip on how I'm going to sell ice cream or whatever it is.
Tax services. Yes.
Tax services.
That's a great question. We actually created a methodology because we had so many people coming to us saying, hey, I want to get on Facebook and I'm going to make $1 million. We said, well, time out. Well, what's your search strategy? Well, what do you mean search strategy? So what we did is we segmented it, and we said, well, first of all, you have to know who your audience is, know what actions you want them to take, and know the objectives of whatever you're doing. Just like a plan for your business. You need to have a plan for your,
right?
Yeah, there's not any secret. Then the graphical elements, do they reflect that plan? I can't tell you how many people come to us and say, well, I want somebody to click on this button. And you go, well, where's that button again? Well, that's graphical elements that push it up front, making sure that the programming's stable and secure. And then the first part of marketing, we normally look at organic search engine optimization, so doing things in the back end of your website that it naturally climbs to the top of the search engines. We look at pay-per-click advertising. So that's the sponsored keywords that you see at the top and the side of Google.
Okay.
And then we look at email marketing. Those are the easiest things to commit to, the lowest cost, and the highest return. After that, we look at the analytics. So now that we have traffic coming to the site, what is it doing? Is it doing what we expected? Do we need to make changes? Do we need to make changes to our marketing or our site? Conversion rate is what we spend a lot of time looking at. So how many people come to the site and actually take one of the actions that you were anticipating? On an e-commerce site, we look for a 2% conversion rate. 2% of the people that come to the site actually buy a product. And if they don't, well, what did we do wrong? And we try to fix it, and we try to
raise the
ascertain
conversion.
it. And then finally, we get to social media and content syndication and blogs and podcasts. Those items are a little bit more branding in element, which is not a direct response. And most small business owners want a direct response. So that's why we look at the others first.
How long does it take before you can see, even if you did all the elements correctly?
It's different.
Before you can see some results. I notice things are so changing so rapidly that we feel like, oh, gee, we have a great website, and then you come out with an iPad or an iPhone, and it doesn't work on that so good. Okay, what do we do now? Redo it, get a different application. It seems very complicated. In SCORE, do they recommend, as part of business planning, to look at the technology?
Absolutely. It's actually very interesting because within SCORE, we do recommend not just that they look at technology, but that you actually pay to get a professional website. So we would recommend they call somebody like Doug and have the website designed professionally because of all the things you've described. You know, Louise, you said, well, I got a new computer and now it doesn't work quite right. The other thing that we tell people in SCORE is that it's important for them to understand who their target audience is. And very much like what Doug was talking about when he discussed his target audience and said, you know, we need to make the website and the Facebook page and the LinkedIn and social media all tie together, it is also important that you know who your target is so that you use the right systems. You know, it's kind of an interesting thing, but if your target audience is an elderly crowd, maybe people who are 80 years old and over, it's very possible you still need to be in the yellow pages because that may be where that group of people is still looking for information.
And with a very big font.
Exactly. Yeah, big enough for me to read.
Yeah, and these, right.
Well,
and readers, right.
well, if you're
multilingual as
targeting-
well.
Exactly. You're targeting a younger audience, you may need multilingual pages, and we say you really do need to go to an expert. I will tell you the other thing we talk about with technology is when you do your advertising and communications online like that, the advertising rules still apply. So if you're running a sweepstakes, you need to know what the rules are about a sweepstakes. I don't know if, Doug, if you provide any counsel on that when people say, well, I'd like to make an offer on my website. I see this a lot on Facebook now, where folks are saying, you know, they're going to run a reverse raffle, or they're going to run
Illegal in the state of Florida, for example, right? Raffles.
Exactly.
Unless you get special dispensation from, I don't know, Scott, I guess, somebody.
It's something like that. But if you're on the internet, how do you protect yourself to make sure that that offer isn't running in Florida if it would be illegal in Florida?
How do you stop it, you mean? Oh, you have
Yeah.
to sort of
You-
have some...
I think you need
some language that says if you live in Florida, don't enter.
You have some combination of language and some combination of an expert web designer to help make sure that you're not reaching out to places you don't belong without having actually checked what the rules and requirements are.
And I handle the online marketing for our law firm, and I will tell you, it takes time. Any business that's coming in and starting, if you've got any type of market whatsoever that searches online for you, I highly recommend getting a good SEO firm, search engine optimization firm like Doug's, to come in and work with designing it for your target audience. But remember, it takes time. It could be 6 to 12 months before it gets to the first page. But when it does, you'll see your phone start ringing off the hook very, very quickly if you've taken the time and effort to do it. It's one of the most valuable investments
And
you
of
can
course,
do
as
in
somebody,
your business.
with marketing all the way around, your points are always well taken, which is, you know your customer and that you're going after them. I saw recently a cartoon, two men at a funeral home, and they're the only two people. There's a bunch of chairs, and one says to the other, you know, I don't understand it. He's got 5,000 Facebook friends. So why is it so empty? I guess he wasn't talking
They're
to
all
the right
mourning
people.
online.
Wrong people. We're going to talk more in just a minute. We're going to take a short public service announcement break. Please stay tuned in. Be back in a minute. Welcome back to Creating Your Own Job, our new series to help you do the very best you can and learn the best you can what the elements are in starting your own company. I'm Louise Thompson, the Executive Director at Tampa Bay Community Network, which provides training and the ability for people to have video services done and the ability for people to have a show just like this one. So if you want one, come on down and see us, and we'll help you get one started. With us once again, Rochelle Friedman Walk, who is a volunteer with SCORE, and your company name is?
I'm an attorney at McIntyre, Panzarella, Thanasides, Hoffman, Bringold, and Todd.
Is there a shortcut to that?
We just call it the McIntyre firm.
The McIntyre firm, okay. That's great. And Doug Pace, who is here representing, in some part, the Greater Tampa Chamber of Commerce, who's on the executive committee, and your company name is?
Bayshore Solutions.
Okay. And James Sutton, who is representing the Hillsborough Bar Association.
Lawyer referral service.
Lawyer referral service, pardon me. A tax attorney and a CPA. And the name of your company?
I'm a partner in the firm Moffett, Gaynor & Sutton. We do nothing but sales tax.
Nothing
Just
but
about.
sales
Just
tax.
about all sales
Well,
tax
let's
in
talk
Florida.
about sales tax, that you
All
just
right.
mentioned it. Sales tax, we hate that word. You know, it gets very confusing here. We teach people how to do video production services, not taxed. We give them dubs of their programs when
And the
they're
whole
here.
thing is taxed.
That's taxed.
Yeah.
And, you know, even our CPA occasionally confuses me. So there are times you charge tax in the state of Florida and times you don't.
Sales tax seems like one of the most obvious things. You're selling tangible personal property, you charge a tax. We get calls, 5 or 6 calls a week of clients that have found themselves in audit by the Department of Revenue, and they think everything's fine. They think they've been doing everything above board, and they realize they were doing a small little thing wrong, but every day. And it adds up, and an audit's usually over 3 years, and they could end up having their entire year's income wiped out with interest, penalties, and an assessment.
What's a common mistake?
One of the most prevalent things we've been seeing lately is Florida charges, it's one of 2 states in the whole country that charges a tax on commercial rent. And you think that'd be real easy. You're renting a space, your landlord is charging you a lease rental payment, and you're paying sales tax on it. And when you've got that scenario, it's real easy because your landlord is paying attention to it. They're responsible for it. But we were talking about forming an LLC for your business. What if your LLC and your business is separate from the land that you're running your business out of? So the land you own personally, and then you've got a legal entity that is doing the operations. Well, your legal entity doing the operations is the one generating the cash. Logically, most people would think that's the one that's going to be paying the mortgage payments. Florida Department of Revenue treats that mortgage payment as rent, and you're supposed to be paying sales tax on it. And the greenest auditor out there is trained to look whether you've got rent on your books and see if you've got a building listed as an asset. If you're paying rent and you don't have a building, they want to see where you're paying your sales tax. And businesses left and right around the state of Florida get hit with this, even if your entities are disregarded.
That sounds so totally confusing.
It is. It catches everybody off guard.
Is that the one that also, it sounds like the thing that applies, I remember when I was running a business from my home for a period of time, and the accountant said, okay, so now can I deduct part of my taxes, mortgage, electricity, utility bills, because I'm running my business from here? Well, yeah, but you might have to add it as income back to you personally or something. Just mind-boggling. I thought you were trying to help me. I was like, that sounds like that's a wash. I don't want to touch that because now I have to file things.
Home
right?
offices can get very, very complicated. A lot of people just starting their own businesses run other home offices. A lot of very successful people still have a
Apple.
home office these days.
Let's do
Yeah,
Apple
let's do it right out of your garage and start a multi-billion-dollar company. Yes.
Right.
In home offices, you can set up your home office, and for federal tax purposes, you can designate what area is your office and start deducting that percentage of your total square foot as part of your mortgage payment is really being spent as a business expense. Part of your electricity and part of your insurance, everything is a business expense. It gets a little complicated though. It's not something you want to do on your own. You definitely want a CPA, and coming up to April 15th, you out to do that type of thing. sales taxes, going back to it, sales tax is not just on the sale of tangible personal property. How many people have ordered something from Amazon and not have tax charged?
Right. Happens all the time.
Nobody admitted it's going live. You don't want a letter from the Department of Revenue.
Right.
I don't know.
But you hear about it in the news a lot. They're talking about Amazon laws and creating new taxes so Amazon's forced to collect. Well, all this time there's laws in the books that say you that bought from Amazon is supposed to be paying a use tax on all those products you bought tax-free. And
Besides Amazon collecting it?
Besides, if Amazon's not collecting it, if you're buying it without paying sales tax and you use it in the state, you're supposed to pay a use tax, the same dollar amount as the sales tax if you bought it here.
Now, there's an exemption, as I understand it, if you download a program or download software. And I think that's a hot topic now.
It's a very hot topic.
Because it's not tangible? Or
it's not tangible personal property. So if you went into your Best Buy and bought QuickBooks, a great software for running your business.
Right.
If you bought the disc and the whole package, you pay sales tax on it right there. But if you go and download QuickBooks from the QuickBooks website and don't get any tangible personal property, it's not subject to sales tax. Because you're never receiving any tangible personal property.
Right, and that's unique really to Florida. So, if you lived in a different state, the rule may be different because state tax is very much a local tax. And in Florida, one of the things I try to remind people is that we're a user fee-based economy. And so sales tax and use tax, as well as all the licenses that you need, are all fee-based. So if you're going to run that business out of your home, and let's say it's going to be a handyman business, you might sell some tools or products with your handyman business that might have sales tax. But you might also need to go to the state website, which you can go to myfloridalicense.com, and figure out if the kind of work you're doing requires you to have a license, which generally comes with a license fee, a tax if you will. And then you have to look at your county and say, for the type of business I am providing, do I have to have an occupational license in my county?
And then don't forget the city.
Don't forget the city is right, Louise. And you have to look
Been
at
there,
all
done
of
that
those.
one. Oh
And
my.
essentially, for the most part, they are taxes. Where you're at the top level in Florida, you might be actually applying for a license. But as you're getting through Hillsborough County and the city of Tampa, it's primarily paying a user fee or tax for running your business in those locations.
And that has nothing to do with if you need a license to be a contractor or some other professional or even a non-professional.
Well, they do marry them together a little bit depending on the topic and the type of license. So for instance, if you were, let's say, an electrician, you might have to go to myfloridalicense.com and determine what kind of electrical licensing you need. You might have to actually go take some courses. You might have to pass a test. And then you may also have to be licensed in your county and your city to perform electrical services. So they do catch you kind of on both ends.
And you may have to post a bond, right, in some of these cases?
You might have to post a bond, and you might be, a bond is, for people who don't know, is kind of like insurance of a sort. It's proof of your ability to pay in the event something goes wrong with your services. But then you might also need other insurances,
Right.
such as liability insurance. And bonds and liability insurance is a way of shifting the risk, the financial risk of your services, over to an insurance company. So you pay a premium in return for which you get a greater amount of insurance in case something goes wrong, whether it's with your business. I know at SCORE, one of the things we tell people is if you drive for your business, your insurance, your personal insurance, probably doesn't cover you from a liability point of view. And so you need to actually go out to your insurance company and determine if you have coverage. So now, not only do you have to look at sales tax, use tax, license fees, occupational tax fees, you also have to look at whether you need a bond and whether you need specific insurance and where you're going to get of those parts. And, you know, it sounds very complicated, but one of the things that I like most about SCORE is that when you get your free SCORE mentor, they will help you navigate and help you figure out what are all those boxes you have to check off, and how do you find people qualified for the kind of business you're going into to help
James,
you.
You talk about sales tax, and I think I remember that even though we're in the state of Florida, and something maybe isn't taxable, I'm talking about, well, I start a business. Aren't I liable for maybe California taxes?
Your business can be liable, but the Supreme Court has done a pretty good job of trying to protect businesses that are from out of state. There's a case from 1992 called Quill versus North Dakota that says you have to have some type of physical presence in the state for an out-of-state revenue department to force you to have collection obligations as the business owner and to force you to collect. That's what Amazon's getting away with, is because Amazon doesn't have any physical presence in Florida, it's not required to collect. The state of Florida is not legally able to force it to collect the sales tax. So as a small business, if you've got one location and this is where you are and you're selling all over the country, you've got a lot of protection from having to collect. That being said, there are 3 bills right now in federal Congress trying to change that, to say if a business has revenues up to a certain amount, they have to start collecting. But right now, there are 1,100 sales tax jurisdictions in this country. That's 1,100 different jurisdictions that you have to know their laws, what they do, when to collect, when to file returns. Some of them you file one return with the state, like Florida, and then it gets disseminated to all the counties, localities, and jurisdictions. Other places, each little county and city have their own tax returns. And so if you're doing an internet sale, if this law passes and you cross that threshold amount, this mom and pop store that's doing really well, all of a sudden is having to figure out sales taxes, whether the cotton candy they're selling is subject to a junk food penalty tax in South Carolina, or if it's completely exempt as food in Florida. They have to figure that out as they're selling it.
He's even going worse. He's selling in Canada and London, so he's trying to figure out that.
Value-added taxes, yeah, it can be really complicated.
And what about those states in which, I remember New York, being a New Yorker myself, that there's a lot of things you can't just do in New York, because they
walk the streets.
Yeah. I think you can walk the streets. No, you meant that in a different way. And there's no tax on that. Anyway.
I didn't mean it that way.
I know you didn't, but in any event. I recollect when I was doing marketing and advertising for certain companies that they couldn't go into New York with offers for, let's say, swampland in Florida or things like this without having licenses in the state of New York or certain requirements on them. Does the internet get into that too? I mean,
if you're selling something that's restricted, for example, all the Canadian companies that try to sell drugs on the internet,
right.
States get all over them and literally issue injunction notices to them that they're not allowed to sell, and they start filing suits in federal court to stop them from doing it. When you run into those situations, are very restricted. If you're selling fruit, a lot of states have serious restrictions on fruit transferring for different types of insects and diseases that they don't want their local crops being subjected to. You've got to deal with those. So depending on your industry, you could have some real issues with that type of thing.
I think another piece that somebody might want to take into consideration is many times smaller companies are looking for money, and they're not actually looking to sell their product in another state, but they're looking to raise funds from somebody in another state, whether it's through an angel investor or possibly
Nigeria, for
Nigeria, or possibly, you know, very popular today is the EB-5 investors, which are foreign investors that if they invest money in a U.S. company, they may get a fast track to a visa. But where I was really heading is there are something in every state called blue sky laws and registration rules about securities. And I found that a lot of times people say, well, I'm only raising money from friends and family. I'm not trying to raise money, you know, through the securities market. I'm not trying to do something like that. But you have to really think about who you're asking for money for your company and how much money you're asking for to make sure you're not violating offering rules in those states. I know one of the things that I've seen is kind of a new way of raising money in other states is these websites that kind of, I think there's like Kickstart or Jumpstart, and they...
Kickstart I've seen.
Yeah, where you can raise money, and I think it's still sitting before Congress as to whether or not it is considered a stock offering and whether it's subject to the securities rules, but you can raise money from other people all over the country. And it's becoming very all over the world, exactly. It's becoming very popular. And what these sites do is it's called crowdfunding. And I'm finding that a lot of small businesses today, they're trying to sell their products. They're also trying to get money to get their businesses going because bank financing is so difficult right now. And they are actually out there using crowdfunding sites to raise funds from people all over the country.
But isn't that a nonprofit site, the Kickstarter? Or they can just make up some...
Actually, I don't know if Kickstart is or is not a not-for-profit, but there are very specific rules and size of offering that would permit you to use those crowdfunding sites to, there's multiples of them, to raise money. And I think that part of the deal with it is it needs to be under $1 million, and I think that you have to offer something in return, which is something other than a return on your money. So maybe if you're going to sell something on your new website, then you might offer, or maybe the video we're making here today, you know, you can offer a copy of the video and get funding to start your own video studio.
Right.
So I'm seeing that happening a lot more often in my own practice where people are reaching out across borders.
Doug, do you have to cover this when you're creating some of these solutions for
Some
people,
of it,
their
but then
internet stuff,
we
or
refer
do they have
everybody
their
back to their
lawyers?
attorneys as well.
Okay.
I mean, you know, one thing as I listen to us talk, you know, I want to make sure that we're not coming across as building your own business as scary as we're almost making it sound. You know, I started my company 14 years ago. We've been Tampa Chamber Business of the Year, U.S. Chamber Business of the Year finalist. I can't tell you there's anything more rewarding than starting your own company and building it
And being up
working with the
day and
people.
night trying to get it all done.
You know, I can tell you a lot of mistakes, like with use tax that we've made in our past, and you know we've overcome it, and we look back at it, and we kind of laugh at it, and we go, you know, remember when we forgot or we didn't do that right? And it's an amazing process, and I think the biggest thing that I could tell somebody as an entrepreneur is make sure you have the right organizations behind you. Make sure you're getting the right advice. It's not as scary as it sounds. But you have to listen, you have to ask questions, you have to get advice, you have to have your checklist, you have to have your plan in place. And then amazing things happen. You know, the great thing about, you know, we have offices here in Fort Lauderdale, the great thing about Florida and the great thing about Tampa in general is it's a pretty inviting business community. I've done business in other states and other areas where you don't have as many resources, you don't have as many people who just want to talk to you. And Tampa especially, people bring you in. I can tell you billion-dollar CEOs of billion-dollar companies that I've met through the chamber or other organizations that'll take my phone call and I can ask questions to, and I can say, well, what did you do when this happened to you? And they'll work through advice.
There's so much about Tampa that it's a small town.
It's a small southern town feel to it, and it really...
And the chambers are all very good at, I mean, the Greater Tampa Chamber, which, as I pointed out earlier, I was on the Board of Governors years ago. But also, there's something like, in the Bay Area, something like 25 different chambers, 13 of them in Hillsborough County and another 12 or so in Pinellas. And there's plenty of them. There's plenty of networking sites. And the once you get involved in the nonprofits and so forth, you sort of cross over so much. I mean, everybody knows everybody.
Well, and I think that's part of, you know, Tampa has a great entrepreneurial environment.
Yeah, and it just got written about recently in some magazine, didn't it? That we were one of the better...
We were one of the top entrepreneurial areas. We were one of the best places to start a startup.
Yeah.
But, you know, so many people are starting startups in the area, and then so many people talk to each other, And it just creates this vibe, and it creates this energy. And then we have great professionals, great legal professionals, great accounting professionals. And it's just amazing to see what's happening.
I'm glad you reminded us to get positive
Yeah.
again, because we are talking about some of the troubles you can get into. And of course we need to, because you've got to watch out for those little things that are around there.
One of the things that wasn't available 10, 15 years ago for somebody starting out a business on their own, if you're wanting to be professional, but you don't have the money to spend and you feel like you've got the clientele that you need to be out of your house and have an office, they've got something now called executive office space, where you can rent one office in an office building on a floor with a whole bunch of other similar-minded professionals. They're all renting 1 or 2 offices. And for a very reasonable monthly fee, you get the office, you get a receptionist that answers the phone for you and everybody else, conference rooms, video conferencing, break room, coffee services. If you need some extra help, they have administrative help that charges by the hour. It can give you a great address and a great professional look for under $1,000 a month.
I've got this very hopeful attitude about the economy having had this terrible downturn, that there have been that I think in the last 20, 30 years, we have seen such a decrease in service orientation. You know, we have all these press 1 for this and 2 for that and whatever, and you walk into a convenience store and the guy's on the phone with his girlfriend, and poor service everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. And people old enough like I am to remember when they gave you something to go to the bank, like here's a oven or a toaster or whatever. And they did check your air, and you didn't have to pay to have your tires checked or your windshield wiped.
I heard an auditor the other day trying to charge sales tax on the air the other day.
Oh my God! Isn't that count just like, you know, like the QuickBooks? So what I keep thinking is, if this downturn had anything good come of it, it would be that all those people that weren't servicing us well are replaced by people coming in, starting a new business, who are willing to meet deadlines, do what they say they're going to do, talk to you personally, and become the next Apples or whatever.
I have a great story about one of the Chamber has a Small Business of the Year program.
Right.
And one of the last winners of the Small Business of the Year program, he was an executive at Chase Bank. And he was displaced and obviously not happy about it, but you know, he said, okay, I got to provide for my family. What can I do? He started a new business. And that business has grown, and it's been incredible. He's given a lot back to the Tampa Bay community, and he finally won Business of the Year. So you look at these people that, you know, you're in a weird situation because of the bad economy, but then take it and turn it around and make something incredibly positive.
And I think what Doug is saying is very consistent with what I'm seeing in my own practice with private clients as well as at SCORE. The typical person attending our classes isn't someone who's 22 years old and right out of college saying, gee, I want to start a business. But instead, these are experienced, knowledgeable people who have made an intelligent choice to either start their own business or, because they had no choice, left their business situation and now have started great new businesses, a lot of times filling in a niche
That's
that
exactly right.
they saw in their much bigger business career that nobody was fulfilling. And they're coming to us to get those businesses going, and quite frankly, they're very successful businesses. They have exploded because these are people who understand the business they're in. They know how to get into business. What they need is a little bit of advice to keep it going. And I think Doug is right. I mean, you know, I see lots and lots of new businesses starting really every month.
Yeah. I might not have asked you something you really want to get across to this viewer audience. And so I'm going to ask you now. Give me a minute of whatever you think we should really make sure the viewer knows who's trying to get their own job.
One of the things, as we've talked about starting your own businesses and getting licenses and the type of entity, one of the very important things that a lot of people forget to pay attention to is no matter what you're selling, you need a contract. You need something that the customer signs that says what your obligations are and what the customer rights are and what they can't do. Can they return your product? Can they request a refund? Can they do things? Think through this and be aggressive. It's your business. Protect yourself right from the get-go. If you can afford to hire an attorney to help draft it that specializes in your industry, all the better. But go up front right then, right there, and protect yourself from the get-go, and it will reward dividends 10 times over in the long run.
Plus you have to think it out, so that's even more important.
Yes.
And if you got a partner, at least you two might agree on something.
Just two quick things. One, and this is from my own experience, is while you're building your business and you're making your plan for the future, really think about the culture of your company. Really think about what that means and what it's going to be like to work at your company or work with you, what it's going to mean for your clients and especially your employees. You know, we have a hard time with all this unemployment. I still have a hard time of finding employees, as much as people can't believe it. And it's because we have a very strong culture of service. We have a very strong culture of solutions. And it's hard to find people to plug and play in that. And the other thing I would tell you is make sure as you're building your business, you get involved in your community. I can't tell you the rewards that I've gotten from serving on the chamber board or serving on a local infrastructure committee or serving with a nonprofit and the connections that come with that. As I said, one of the most powerful things that you can make in the community is the connections to the other business owners. So that you can say, hey, let's go to lunch because I'm having some problems and let's talk it through. You know, we're actually building the office in Denver right now. I have lunch next week with I'll call him a mentor, but he's really just a friend that's been there, done that I can ask advice to. And I've met him through these organizations that I'm part of.
Fabulous. Rochelle.
You know, one thing you want to think about is what you're going to do during the year or two it's going to take to get your business started. So you have to put your plan together, you have to have your agreements, you want to make sure you have the right culture, all of the things that James and Doug have said, but you also have to have a way to live. And you either have to have a pot of money put aside so that you can dedicate your time and energy to building that business, and I know that's what I did when I started my law firm, or you have to come up with another way to fund your life so that you can dedicate your time and energy to building that company. It's really key to your success.
And where do you get that? Well, we're going to do that in our next show. We're going to talk about startup funding and finding resources to help finance what you're trying to do. And I know that's
great.
Really, really hard today. I so appreciate all of you coming here. I want to have you back again or something because I think you have so much to offer people in terms of advice. Maybe your phone will ring on the side, or the at least scores and the chamber and the lawyer referral service and so forth.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah,
Thank you
really
for having
appreciate
us.
your being here, and hope that the audience got as much out of this as we did. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.